We begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, 3 lines up from the bottom of the Amud where it says Eimer. So we're in the middle of a sugya here. We're discussing the opinion of Beis Hillel that says that when you do the hazah of the dam, or it's not really hazah, it's the matonis. When you place the blood on the mizbeach for the carbon chatos with your finger, so the mitzvah is that it should be placed on all four corners. But Beis Hillel learns out from the pasuk that if you place just on one corner, that accomplishes the kapara of the carbon. The other three is to continue and finish the mitzvah, but the kapara is done. So now regarding the hazah of the blood or the placing of the blood of the other three, the question is, what kind of a status does that have? Do I say that since it's a mitzvah to complete it, so therefore it's similar to the first one, that you're still continuing the avodah of placing the blood on the mizbeach? Or do I say, because the first one already accomplished the kapara, therefore the additional three is similar to something else which follows later, which is the shirayim, all the leftovers. What happens to the leftovers? You pour it on the foundation of the mizbeach. So these three are similar to what's poured on the foundation of the mizbeach. So the Gemara here before brought Rav Papa, brought a whole list of things that there's a nafkaminist. Regarding certain halachas, these three is like the first, and regarding certain things, these three is like the shirayim. It's already like considered to be like leftovers. One of the things that the Gemara is discussing right now is the halacha by Karm Chatas, which is called kibbus. And the halacha is, if you have any of the blood that sprayed onto the garment of the kayin, he has to wash it off. Now, the thing though is, that halacha, that what sprays on the garment of the kayin has to be washed off, is only if it's blood that still has to be sprayed on the mizbeach. If it's blood that the avodah with it was done already, then that doesn't have to be washed off. It has to be blood which is fit for being placed on the mizbeach, and it's still the avodah with it. It has to be completed, and it wasn't completed yet, and it went onto the garment. Okay, so now Rav Papa says that regarding these three, after you already did the first time that you placed on the mizbeach, now the other three, that blood that you still have to place the other three times, if it goes on the kohen's garment at that stage, it has to be washed off, because the avodah still has to be completed.
It sounds like it has to be washed in the middle of the avodah.
No. So I mentioned yesterday. No, it doesn't have to be washed.
That's what he's
No. It has to be washed later. It's a separate thing. Later on, correct.
So why are we worrying about that?
No. It's true. It's not for now. For later, it has to be washed off. But that's the halacha about washing it off. But you're right. Not b'shas ma'aseh. Okay. So now the point, the chiddush of Rav Papa is that the blood at this point is still considered to be blood that you're in the middle of doing the avodah, of placing the blood on the mizbech, and therefore if it goes in the garment, it has to be washed off. Okay, now Rav Papa brings a raya from a Mishnah to this point, he brings a raya from a Mishnah later here in the Masechta. Okay, the Mishnah there says, if you want to see the lashon of the Mishnah again, it's a little bit further up over here in the Am, it says, Nitaz minatzavra. Okay, it says, Minakeren, umina yisoid, eineton kibus. If the blood was already on the corner of the mizbeach or was already on the foundation of the mizbeach, that blood does not have to be washed off, because it's done. Once the avodah is done with it, it goes on the garment, it doesn't have to be washed off. Now the Gemara is medayik, but if it's roy lekeren, if it's still blood that is fit for placing on any of the corners of the mizbeach, it has to be washed off. That includes not only the blood that has to be placed on the first time on the mizbeach, but the other three as well, because it still has to be placed on the corners, even though it's not ma'akiv the kapara, but it's still roy to be placed on the corner, so therefore if that blood goes on the garment, it has to be washed off. Now the Gemara said, if you be being medayik this way, it said in that Mishnah, umin hayisoid, blood that was already poured on the foundation does not have to be washed off, because it's already done, it's the remnant of the blood that was poured on the yisoid. So the Gemara says, so what does that mean? But if it's royally yisoid, if it wasn't yet poured onto the foundation of the mizbeach, you finished already placing it on all four corners of the mizbeach. Now you have the blood that has to be poured out. It wasn't poured out yet. Does that also have to be washed off from the garment if it went on the garment? But the Gemara says, it says in the pasuk, asher yazeh, only blood that still has to be placed on the mizbeach has to be washed off from the garment. This was already done. Now the Gemara said, it must be that Mishnah cannot prove the point that Rav Papa said, because that Mishnah is a opinion of Rab Nechemia that we don't hold like him. Rab Nechemia holds that just like the placing of the blood on the corners of the Mizbeach is a part of the Aveda, that if that blood goes on the garment, it has to be washed off. So too we could say that Rab Nechemya holds that blood that you have to pour the shirayim on the foundation is also blood that still there's something to do with it. There's an avodah to complete with it, and therefore if it gets on the garment, it has to be washed off. It's only Rab Nechemya's opinion, and now the Gemara brought a source. Where does Rab Nechemya say this? Rab Nechemya says this in another Mishnah regarding the din of shchutei chutz. If you shecht a carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash, you chayav kares. So regarding that, Rab Nechemya says, if you take the blood that you already sprayed on the Mizbeach, you take it outside the Beis HaMikdash and you pour it, like they would pour it on the foundation of the Mizbeach, you chayav for that kares. You only chayav what you do outside if it's an Aveda that you do inside. So that shows that according to Rab Nechemya, pouring the shirayim on the foundation of the Mizbeach is also an Aveda. You chayav for that kares outside. Therefore, according to Rab Nechemya, this Mishnah is saying that the blood that you already put on one corner of the Mizbeach, the blood that's still, there's additional avodah to be done with it, to put on the other corners, you would have to wash that off from your garment. So it's only Rab Nechemya's opinion. Rav Papa was trying to prove this according to the Chachamim, L'kula Almet, not so the Gemara here is arguing, no, it's only Rab Nechemya. That's the point we were holding. Now let's continue inside. Says the Gemara, how could you say that Mishnah there that Rav Papa tried to prove his point from is Rab Nechemya's opinion? Where do I see that Rab Nechemya gives a significance to the shirayim, the leftovers that's poured on the foundation, le'inyan halah? He says that blood, that's shirayim, if you would bring it outside the Beis HaMikdash, then I say yechayev kares for that. Why? Because midi dahava evarim upedarim, because this is similar to the pieces of the carbon that have to be burnt on the mizbeach. What's the halacha regarding those pieces that have to be burnt on the mizbeach? They don't hold up the kapara. They're not integral for the kapara. But if someone burns those pieces on outside of the Beis HaMikdash, yechayev kares for this. What you see is gabe this halacha of going outside the Beis HaMikdash. It's not only for something that's integral to the kapara. So therefore, I could say legabe that the shirayim as well. The shirayim is already an aveda which is not integral to the kapara. But yet, if you do it outside, you would be chayev kares for this. But le'inyan kibos, regarding the halacha of washing off the garment from this blood, from the carbon chatas, mishametle. Where did you see that Rab Nechemya said such a thing? The pasuk simply says asher yazeh, the blood that you have to still spray, which could simply mean only the blood that you need for the kapara itself, but not the shirayim. Here, this chiddush that we're saying that according to Rab Nechemya, even the shirayim, that blood that's meant for the shirayim, if it gets onto the garment, you have to wash it off. Who says Rab Nechemya holds this? So in other words, the Gemara is saying this whole point that you're trying to say that Mishnah there is only Rab Nechemya, and Rav Papa has no proof from that Mishnah. There's no source to say that this is Rab Nechemya's opinion. So the Gemara says, yes, I'll show you a braisa that this is Rab Nechemya's opinion. Where do I see this? Because Vatanya, we learned in a braisa that says as follows: blood that needs to go onto the foundation of the mizbeach. In other words, this is the blood that the placing it on the corners of the mizbeach is done, and now you just have to pour it onto the foundation. This is the shirayim. Tu'unin kibus. If it gets onto the garment, it has to be washed off. So right over here, this is where you see this point. It says this is the shirayim, and if it gets onto the garment, you have to wash it off. Umachshava mayelas ben. Another thing that Tana de Braisa says, the machshava of pigul regarding these bloods, when you pour it on the mizbeach, if you think I'm going to eat the meat out of its time, so this machshava, it'll be pigul. This is a huge chiddush. The Gemara is going to ask on this. We never find pigul regarding this. V'hamayla mehem b'chutz. And also of this shirayim, if you do it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv kodesh for that. And v'domim, now the Braisa goes on to say, however, if v'domim hanishpachan la'amo, if there's other leftover blood that you don't pour anymore on the foundation of the mizbeach, but what's done with the additional leftover blood? It's going to be poured out to the Amma. There's a canal that flows outside of the Beis HaMikdash. It goes out to Nachal Kidron. That blood that you pour into this canal, aim to unin kibus. If that gets onto the garment of the kayin, it doesn't have this status of the blood of the chatas that has to be washed off of the garment. If you're pouring that blood into the canal and you're having a machshava of chutz l'zmanai, that machshava doesn't affect anything. If you do this outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you'll be potter for that. This is the Braisa. So now the Gemara says, here I see that Rab Nechemya holds regarding shirayim, that when that blood that's made now to pour out on the Yisoid, Shirayim. If it gets onto the garment, it has to be washed off, because Man Shamet Le'da'ama Maila Ben Bachotz Chayiv, who is the one that says that if you take this Shirayim and you pour it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you chayiv kares for that, Rav Nechemia. This is Rav Nechemia. That's a clear Mishnah that the Gemara brought before you in the end of Lamed Ches. V'ka'amar, and Rav Nechemia in this Braisa is adding, and is also saying, Ta'on Kibbus, that this blood, this Shirayim, has to be washed off from the garment. So therefore the Gemara is backing up its point that it said before, that the Mishnah Rav Papa tried to quote to prove his point is not a good proof, because that Mishnah there is only a unique opinion. Rav Nechemia that treats Shirayim of a carbon like the blood that has to be sprayed on the Mizbeach. Okay, but the Gemara now questions this entire source and the way we're understanding this Braisa here, because there's a big question, as I indicated before. The second point this Braisa says is regarding the Shirayim, that if you have a thought of pigel for this, it will be effective to passel the carbon. Is that true? How can you say such a thing? But we learned clearly, Yotzu Shirayim, that we exclude the Shirayim of the blood after you already finished spraying the blood. And Vaktares Emurin, or the pieces of the carbon that are burnt on the Mizbeach. She'em Akvenes HaKapara, these are stages in the Aveda of the carbon that are not integral for the Kapara. She'em Machshava Mi'alisban. Any machshava of to passel the carbon, whether chutz l'zmanei, chutz l'mekaymei, they don't passel the carbon. So how is this Braisa? That's something everyone agrees to. So how is this Braisa here saying that the machshava would be mayeles regarding Shirayim? And says the Gemara, Kitanya, or this is actually, it's not really an answer. This is all a continuation of the point that the Gemara is trying to prove here. So you're going to have to say that Kitanya, when this Braisa over here says machshava mayeles ben, what is it referring to? It's not talking about the Shirayim. Rather, it's talking about b'shalosh matonos shebechatos. It's talking about the point that we were discussing before. When you spray the blood once on the Mizbeach, and then there's the additional 3 times that still has to be placed on the Mizbeach, and it's regarding that. If you place the blood with these 3 additional times, over here, there's an inyan of pigel. So the point the Gemara is saying is you're bringing this Braisa to prove to me that Rav Nechemia holds that even regarding Shirayim, I say that it has to be washed off from the garment. But that's not true. It can't be talking about Shirayim because it mentions the union of machshava, pigel. So it has to be talking about a stage before when you still have to place the blood on the Mizbeach 3 times. But the Gemara says it doesn't fit into the words of the Braisa. Ihachi, if so, tu'unin yisaid, the lashon of the Braisa was, we're talking about domim hatu'unin yisaid, the blood that has to now be poured onto the foundation. It sounds like it's blood that is not placed on the corners of the Mizbeach anymore. It's all done. It's the leftovers that you pour on the foundation. Lekaranozli, this is blood that you still have another 3 corners to place it on the corners of the Mizbeach. So why is it saying the Yisaid? Says the Gemara, regarding the lashon of the Braisa, you could say as follows: Nit'onin Yisaid. It still needs to be placed on 3 corners, but when it says Tu'unin Yisaid means it's going to then afterwards go to the foundation of the Mizbeach. So there is a stage to be done before that to place it on the 3 corners, which is not mamish ma'akiv the kapara. So it uses the lashon nit on and yisai that the basic part of the hazah, the mizbeach, was done, and therefore then this goes to the foundation. But the point is, the Gemara is still arguing that we must say that this Braisa is not talking about Shirayim. Regarding Shirayim, there's no din of machshava, there's no din of pigel. So the Gemara asks, on this, you didn't gain anything. Umachshava mayeles behen. Is it true if we are talking about the blood that was already placed on the Mizbeach once, and now there's just the 3 additional times to complete it for the mitzvah, but it's not integral for the kapara? Are you going to say that even regarding that stage, is the machshava of the person going to make it pigel? But Amrit, we said before, Rav Papa explained this before, it said, based on what it said in Beis Hillel's opinion in the Mishnah, that regarding this blood that was already placed once on the Mizbeach, and it just needs another 3 additional times, that loy sharia, you don't need that to be mater, to eat from the basar of the carbon. Even if you don't place it these 3 times, you could still eat it. V'loy mefagla, and also there's no pigel, there's no machshava of pigel regarding these 3 times. V'loy ayla legavoy, and also the halacha that if you bring it inside the Beis HaMikdash, it passels the carbon by a chatos, does not apply to this blood that was already placed on the Mizbeach once. Kisaifon, Rav Papa used this lashon before on Daf Lamed Ches. He says, just like the Shirayim. Kisaifon means just like the blood at the end, just like the Shirayim. Same thing with the blood that was already placed once. You only need these 3 additional times. So our question still remains. How do we learn pshat in this brisa? The brisa says regarding this blood that machshava will be effective to passel. How? How would machshava be effective here? So Ella, what do you have to say regarding this brisa? A different pshat. Kitanyahi, when it says in this brisa that the machshava has an effect on it, we're talking about a unique carbon chatos, and that's only by bedomim hapnimim, by a carbon chatos, where the halacha is regarding this blood that it has to be brought inside the Beis Hamikdash to be sprayed on the mizbeach inside the Beis Hamikdash, or by the pereiches inside the Beis Hamikdash. Now, what's the halacha by the domim apnimiyim? There's a unique halacha regarding the carbon chatos that's brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, according to one opinion, that then when you bring the blood out and you have to pour it on the foundation of the mizbeach, that's ma'akiv. It's a must. That's something which holds up the kapara. It's a ma'akiv that you must pour it on the foundation of the mizbeach. So only regarding this carbon, the blood was not sprayed on the outside mizbeach, only on the inside mizbeach. Then the shirayim is ma'akiv. It's regarding this that the brisa is saying that the machshava will be mayelis behen. That's what it's talking about. So the point of Gemara again is going back now to the point that it's saying before. You're trying to bring me this brisa as a source that Rab Nechemia holds that shirayim, the shirayim of the blood, is something that there's still a halacha that if it sprays onto your garment, you're going to have to wash it off. It's not talking about a regular carbon chatas. It's talking only about the shirayim of the pnimiyim, only shirayim of that carbon chatas that's brought inside the Beis Hamikdash. That's a different thing. So it's not a proof to what we're looking for regarding Rab Nechemia's opinion. So the Gemara asks on this, but if that's the pshat in this brisa, avol, so then what would that mean? If it's blood from a carbon chatos that is placed on the outside mizbeach, so then what would be the din with the shirayim of that carbon? Potter? Are you going to tell me that you would be potter of potter if you brought it outside the Beis Hamikdash, or potter from all these things? You won't have to wash it off from your garment, and the machshava won't have an effect on that. If so, the brisa here, why does it say what it says? The brisa goes on to say, as we read before, that damim hanishpachen la'ama, that when do I say that these halachas do not apply regarding this blood? If it's blood that you're pouring out to the canal, then I say that blood, if it gets onto your garment, you don't have to wash it off, and the machshava that has no effect over there. And if you bring it outside the Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't. You're not chayav kares for that. Why is the Gemara, or the brisa rather, going to that example? Liflek v'lisni b'dida. The brisa can make a distinction regarding the carbon chatas itself, meaning the halacha of shirayim itself. And it could say as follows: when do I say that the shirayim is still something that you need to pour on the side of the mizbeach, and therefore these halachas still apply? That's b'damim apnimiyim, when it's blood from the inside that goes inside the Beis Hamikdash. There, pouring it, the shirayim has a different status. There, the shirayim is integral. So therefore, these halachas will apply. But when it's the blood from the carbon chatas that's placed on the outside mizbeach, since over here, this shirayim, to pour on the yisayid, is not ma'akiv at all, so therefore pater. Over here, all these halachas will not apply. Not the halach of washing it off from your garment, not the halach of machshave, and not the halach of shchutei chutz. Why didn't the brisa make this kind of distinction? So the Gemara says, regarding this point, no, ha'mani Rab Nechemia. This brisa here is following Rab Nechemia's opinion. That's going back to the point that the Gemara is saying here regarding Rab Nechemia. What does Rab Nechemia hold? To Omar, so Rab Nechemia says, Shiyarei Adam she'krivam b'chutz chayiv. That regarding the shirayim, if you brought it outside the Beis Hamikdash, you would still be chayiv for that, even though it's shirayim. But shirayim is, like the Gemara said before, shirayim is no different than the evarim u'pedarim that are brought on the mizbeach. That if you do it outside, you're chayiv. So the shirayim, you also chayiv for this. And so because it goes according to Rab Nechemia, so masnile tlasi peturi lebahadi tlasi chiyuvi. So therefore, if the Tana of the Brisa would want to contrast the shirayim of the chatas apnimi, or the chatas pnimim, and the shirayim of the chatas chitzainim, it couldn't make that contrast regarding all three halachas that the Tana is addressing. Because one of those three halachas is the halacha of maila bachot, of bringing it outside. And when it comes to bringing it outside, the chatas, that's the blood goes inside, and the chatas that the blood goes outside, the din of the shirayim is the same. If you bring it outside the Beis Hamikdash, according to Rab Nechemia, either way, you'll be chayav kares for that. The Tana is looking to make a distinction regarding all three halachas, and you can't make that distinction regarding all three halachas according to Rab Nechemia. Okay, but what's the conclusion of this entire discussion of the Gemara? This point that I see, that Rab Nechemia says that the Shirayim is still something that Yechayev caught for when you bring it outside the Beis HaMikdash, that's only regarding this halacha. But regarding the halacha of kibbus, that you should say that Rab Nechemia holds that if the blood that's destined for pouring shirayim on the yisayid, that if it gets onto your garment, that you have to wash it off. I don't have any source that Rab Nechemia said this. This brisa that we tried to bring, which is a source for what Rab Nechemia said, is not a good source for this, because that brisa has to be talking about only a chatas. It's pnimim. It's a different kind of chatas. It can't be talking about a regular chatas that's brought in the outside mizbeach, because then how would it say machshava meyelis ben? It wouldn't be possible to say this halacha of machshava meyelis ben. Okay, that's the conclusion of the Gemara regarding this discussion regarding Rab Nechemia. Okay, now there's a discussion in Mefarshim what the Gemara means over here to say regarding the Mishnah before that Rav Papa tried to bring a proof to his opinion. What exactly the conclusion of the Gemara over here is, but this is the point that the Gemara is saying, that we don't have a clear source for Rab Nechemia's opinion regarding this halacha of shirayim, that if it gets onto the garment, it has to be washed off. Okay, but now the Gemara goes back to the raya that Rav Papa brought from that Mishnah. This is a Mishnah of Tzadik Gimel. So, what was the raya of Rav Papa? So I read the Mishnah there before. Again, you have to have clear over here what that Mishnah is saying. That Mishnah over there that was quoted in the end of the Lamed Ches, it says that when the blood comes min hakeren, then you don't have to wash it off from your garment. So Rav Papa was medayik. That's only if the blood comes min hakeren. But if it's what's roy from the keren, that you do have to wash off from your garment. That means that even the blood that was already placed on the mizbeach once, there's additional 3 times that you have to place it on the mizbeach. That's still blood that's roy for the keren. There's additional 3 times you have to place on the. So therefore, you have to wash that off from the garment. That was his deed for that Mishnah. So the Gemara's question before was, but when it says umina yisoid, are you going to be medayik the same thing from umina yisoid? That only after it's placed on the yisoid and it gets onto your garment, then you don't have to wash it off. But if it's right to the side, you would have to wash it off. That means even after you finish putting it on the mizbeach on all the corners, how could that be? It's already done. So on this, the Gemara now goes back and says it's not a question. You have to know how to be medayik from that Mishnah. So Ravina says, where am I over here? Ravina Omar. So Ravina says, this is how you have to be medayik from that Mishnah. Mina keren, when it says that the blood that's on the corner of the mizbeach, meaning the hazah was done already, it's already on the keren, then you don't have to wash it off if it gets onto the garment of the kohen. That means mina keren mamish. Once it was take done, it was on the keren. But then you could be medayik from that. The point that Rav Papa said. But if there's still any part you still have to put on the keren, not only the first time, but even the additional 3 times, if it gets onto the garment, it has to be washed off. Now, when it says mina yisoid, when that Mishnah says that if it's on the foundation of the mizbeach, then you don't have to wash it off. Over here, you have to translate it as mina roy li yisoid. Anything that's roy to go on the yisoid of the mizbeach, even that, you will not have to wash it off from the garment. So over here you have to read Mina Yisaid in the Mishnah. Don't be medayik, but if it was royally Yisaid, you still have to wash it off. No, over here you have to read it as Min HaRoyali Yisaid. And therefore there's no contradiction over here. There's no question on Rav Papa. How could you say if it's royally Yisaid and the whole Aveda of the Hazah is done, you still have to wash it off? It says in the Pasuk Asher Yazeh, which means only if the Hazah still has to be done. Because you have to read this in the Mishnah, royally Yisaid.
Just the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. That only if it's royally Yisai, there's that even if it's royally Yisai, you don't have to wash it off anymore. Yeah. Okay, so the Gemara asks on this, why should we read the Mishnah this way? Why are we reading the word keren one way and the word Yisai a different way? So Rav Tachlifa Bagaz asks Ravina about this. Why are you saying this? Why not say Idi v'Idi roihu? Both when it says in the Mishnah the word keren, it means what's roy for the keren. You also don't have to wash off from your garment. And when it says yisaid, it means what's roy for the yisaid. You also don't have to wash off your garment. Why are you making this distinction? Keren means keren, and the word yisaid over there means roy yisaid. So the Gemara says, no, there's a reason why Ravina is saying to read it this way. How would you read it if you just read the simple pshat of the Mishnah? Because hashta, if you read the first point, the Mishnah says that if it was already on the keren, you don't have to wash it off from your garment. But roy lekeren, you do have to wash it off from your garment. So now, once it says roy lekeren amrit, you're telling me that if it's roy for the keren, you still have to wash it off from your again. Roy lekeren amrit loy. You're telling me that if it's roy lekeren, that it's not done yet, and therefore you still have to wash it off from your garment. Roy liyisoid miboye. So if it's roy liyisoid, do you have to tell me that the same halacha would apply? It's obvious that after the hazov, the dam is done, and now it's roy for the yisoid, obviously you don't have to wash it off from your garment. If you have this diuk over here that only once it's on the keren, then it's done. You don't have to wash it off from your garment. And roy le keren not. So then when it says yisoid, you're going to be medaik roy le yisoid. It's obvious. What's the Mishnah being mechadish over here? So therefore, Elo, the way you have to read this is mina keren means mina keren mamish. That if it's mina keren mamish, then you don't have to wash it off from the garment. But what does that mean? But then you have to be medayik. But if it's roy from the keren, you do have to wash it off from your garment because you still have to place it on three corners. And then the Mishnah goes on to say, mina yisoid, that after you placed it on the three corners, and now it has to go to the yisoid, which is min haroy li yisoid, that then after that, don't think that still, since you still have to pour the shirayim on the mizbeach, if it gets onto your garment, you still have to wash it off. And therefore it adds and says, no, that you don't have to wash it off from your garment. So if you look in the Seder of the Mishnah, this is the only way to understand really what the Mishnah is saying. And therefore, this Mishnah could be a proof to the point that Rav Papa said, that when you have the bloods of the Korban Chatos, and you didn't complete all three corners, and it gets onto the garment, it still has to be washed off, because there's still additional to be placed onto the keren. And that's the diak of that Mishnah. If it's on the keren, you don't have to wash it off from the garment. But if it's roy the keren, you do have to wash it off. And then it goes on to say, but mina yisoid, after it's on the mizbeach, and then you have to pour it to the yisoid. That's what's called roy li yisoid, that you do not have to wash off from your garment. Okay. The Gemara goes back to what it said in the Mishnah, Kol anitarn al mizbeach hapnimi chulu, that whatever has to be placed on the inside mizbeach. Here the halacha is that all the matanis that you have to spray on the mizbeach, or in the inside the Beis Hamikdash, is also what's sprayed against the pareiches, 7 times to the pareiches. All of that, if you miss even one, the kapara is not complete. By the kapanas that are brought on the outside mizbeach, it's sprayed on the outside mizbeach, even one is good enough for the kapara. The additional ones is a mitzvah. But in the inside karbanis, everything has to be sprayed. If you're missing one, you're not yetze anything. What's the source for this? Tana Rabbanan, so we learned in the Braisa. It says in the pasuk, va'asa kasha asa. Okay, the Gemara doesn't quote the entire pasuk. Now this pasuk is a pasuk that from the beginning till the end, every word in the pasuk is extra. So the Gemara is going to darshan in this Braisa every single word of this pasuk. Why is it extra? This is a pasuk that it says regarding the par helem davashal tzibur. Par helem davashal tzibur is when the bezdin paskins regarding a certain halacha, and the whole tzibur followed what the bezdin did b'sheigig. So they have to bring a par as a korban chatos. Now, if you look in that parsha, it's in Vayikra. The pasuk there says exactly all the halachas that you have to do with it, almost everything. And then when it completes all the halachas, there's a pasuk where it says v'asal lapar kasher asal lapara chatos ken ya asaloi, that you should do for this par just like what has to be done with the par chatos that was mentioned in the parsha before. What's the par chatos that's mentioned in the parsha before? That's the par chatos of the par kohen HaMashiach. That he also, if he does an avera, he has to bring a par chatos. So the pasuk here is saying what you do with this par is similar to what you do with the par that it was written in the previous parsha. But the problem over here is, as I said, there's no reason for the Torah to make this comparison. Because here, in this parasha itself, by the par Helam Dovishal Tzibur, it says already all the pratim that you have to do. So why is it now adding a pasuk to say, and you should do here like you did there? Okay, so therefore this whole pasuk is extra, and the Gemara darshans every single word. What is it coming to teach? It's an extra pasuk. The answer is, Lichbal Ba'aza Asai. It's coming to say a second time, and it's talking about specifically the kapara, because it says v'chiper kapara by a carbon always refers to the blood sprayed on the Mizbeach. That's the main kapara. So this pasuk is coming to double again and say regarding the spraying of the blood, and v'lama, then it teaches, Shem chiser achas mikol matanis, if you're missing one of the matanis that have to be done with this carbon, lo yasav alei klum, you've done nothing. Now this is a carbon that the blood has to be brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, and you spray it inside by the Pereiches. That's the halacha of this. There's 4 different karbanis chatas that are brought inside. There's a call with chatas apnimiyim, and there's a chatas chitzainis. This is one of the karbanis chatas that have to be brought inside. And here, because the Torah writes again this pasuk va'asala par kasher asa, it's coming to say that it has to be done fully 100% every one of the matanis, and if you're missing one, you've done nothing. Okay, now it says the Braise ein yelo matan sheva shemakvais. So I would say maybe this is only the blood of the carbon chatas that's brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, that's sprayed 7 times against the Pereiches, that is a must to be done. Because I find, why? Because Ela Matan Sheva Shemakvis B'chol Makam. I find in other places that this is a must to be done. The Gemara will later explain where I see this. However, Matan Dalid Minayin, how do I know regarding a carbon chatas that the blood is brought inside the Beis HaMikdash and has to be placed 4 times on the inside Mizbeach? How do I know that that's ma'akiv by the inside Mizbeach? Talmud Loimar, Kain Yase. So the beginning of the pasuk, va'asal apar, and then it says, kasha asal parachatas, and it goes on to say, Kain Yase loy. The Kain Yase is adding another word to say that it's also regarding the 4 times that the blood is placed on the inside Mizbeach. Okay, the next word that it says over here, lapar, it's also, the Gemara darshans that separately. The actual v'asal apar. Here we're darshaning the first. It says in the pasuk twice. It says v'asal apar, do for this par, kasha asal lefarachata. So first the Gemara darshans the first word lapar. When it says here that word lapar, which is extra, ze par yom kippurim. It's coming to say that the par yom kippurim that the Kohen brings, Kohen Gadol brings, is similar to this par helam dovish al tzibur that this pasuk is speaking about. The Gemara will later explain regarding what it's similar. That's what this. So this par is going on that, on the par of Yom Kippurim. Then when it says afterwards in the pasuk, ka'asher asal par, it says again the word par, ka'asher asal par. That's coming to add yet something else. Ze par kohen Mashiach. It's coming to refer to like the par that's mentioned in the parsha before. And what is it coming to say regarding that? That just like over here regarding the par helam dovish al tzibur, which is one kind of chatas that's brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, that we just learned out that all the bloods that's sprayed inside is ma'akiv, and if you're missing even one, there's no kapara. Now by adding kasher asal par, it's coming to say that the part of the Kohen HaMashiach and the parsha before, the same halacha applies. That since it's a chatas pnimi that's brought inside, every matana of the blood is ma'akiv. If you're missing one, it's not. You didn't have the kapara. Then the lashon that it says in this pasuk, ha-chatos. What is this word ha-chatos coming to darshan? Elu si'irei avedas kechavim. This refers to the goat that's brought by avedas zareh. That is also another case of a carbon chatos, that the blood is brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, and that this as well, it has to be sprayed on by the pereiches and the mizbeach hazav, and that it has the same halacha like the par helim dover shel tzibur. There's another detail that it's similar also. And that Rashi brings here that then you take the rest of the carbon chatos and it's burned chutz lamachna. Okay, so by the seir of the avodah zareh, it doesn't spell out the details about it. So it's learned out from here, from this lashon ha-chatos, that the same halacha applies there by this chatos of avodah zareh, like this par helam dava shel tzibur. So the Braisa goes on to say, now yachol shanimar ba'af seir regalim useir rosh chadashim. There's other karbanis chatos that I would think that maybe it has the same halacha, and that's the carbon chatos that's brought on a yontif, and the carbon chatos that's brought on a shchaydish. Then maybe I should compare and say that they also are similar to this par hel and dovish al tzibur in the details that we're talking about here, and that is that the blood has to be brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, and every matana there is ma'akiv, and also that the leftovers of the carbon is burnt putz lamachna. So I would think to compare regarding those karbanis as well. Talmud Loimar, so here we darshan in this pasuk the word loy. It says vasal par kasha asal par chatas kain yasel loy. So the word loy comes to say that no, only for this it's an exclusion. So therefore we exclude that by the chatas that's brought on yontif or the shchaydish, it doesn't apply there. It says the Gemara, Omar Isa, Larabis Eselu, Lohaitzi Eselu. Why are you adding some and excluding some? Why are you adding and saying that the carbon chatas for avodah zarah is similar to this carbon here that has to be brought inside and the rest has to be burnt outside? And why regarding the carbon of Yom Tif and Rosh Chodesh you're excluding that? So the answer is, since I see that in the pasuk there are extra words to add more, and there's also the extra word loi to exclude. So what I add is another kind of carbon chatas, which is coming to atone for a specific aveda that was done, which is the carbon for avodah zarah. So it's a specific aveda that's done that's similar to the par helam dovishal tzibur on a specific aveda. And I exclude the carbon chatos of Yontif or of Rish Chodesh, she'em mechaperen al avedas mitzvah yidua. It's not coming to be mechaper on a specific aveda that a person was over on. What is the carbon of Yontif, of chatos of Yontif and Rish Chodesh come to be mechaper for? It comes to be mechaper for the tumah in the Beis Hamikdash, or kachim that a person ate when there was no awareness about this, when he didn't know, not in the beginning, not in the end. And so this is a carbon that's mechaper for Bechlal, for all the Klal Yisrael, for any time, that kind of a tumah in the Beis Hamikdash. So that's not a specific aveda that's known. Therefore, I exclude that. It's not compared to this par helam dovishal tzibur. Okay, the Braisa goes on to darshan this pasuk. The conclusion of the pasuk, it says v'chiper. The pasuk goes on to say v'chiper aleim akayim v'nislach lehem. So what is this word v'chiper coming to teach? It's coming to add and say that there's a kapara that will happen even without smicha. And when it says v'nislach, that the kapara will be even the leftovers of the blood is not poured on the foundation of the mizbeach, the kapara will still take effect. So now on this as well, the Braisa asks, Umar Isal liv soil bahazois. Why do you darshan from the first half of the pasuk to say that the pasuk is doubling? It's kaiful, what it said before, to say that regarding the bloods that's sprayed on the mizbeach inside or by the pareiches, that I say that the pasuk is doubling and it's a must. But then, in the end of the pasuk, when it says v'chiper, v'nislach, that comes to say that the kapara is done quicker, even without completing everything. There you're saying, what is it coming to say? Regarding the smicha and shirayim, that even if that's not done, the kapara will already take effect. Maybe say the opposite. Maybe smicha and shirayim, it's coming to say that it's ma'akiv, but the blood inside is not ma'akiv. So the answer is, on Amrit, you'll say, paisel ba'zois, I passel regarding spraying the blood inside, because shema akvais b'chol makim. I find in other places that the blood is ma'akiv, and the Gemara will explain later here why that is. And then I'm machshir when it comes to smicha and shirayim to say that b'diavad it's kosher without it. She'em ma'akvais b'chol makim, because I don't find in other places I don't see that it's ma'akiv for this. This is until there's the lashon of the Braisa, which is the source for this halacha that the karbanas chatas that are brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, the blood, every matana of the blood is going to be makiv. The Gemara here later, I will explain all the details of this Braisa.
Shikor.